Let's take a look at the government easing sulfur emission norms, because the government, of course, has removed the 2015 rule of installing sulfur emission systems, and it's also eased the sulfur emission rules for most coal-fired power plants as well. So let's take the conversation forward, in fact, with Anil Razdan, who's the former Power Secretary. So my first question to you, firstly, a very good afternoon. And my first question to you is, what is the exact reason in terms of what you think is the first reason when it comes to this mandate? What do you think was the rationale behind this?
Right from the time when this was introduced, there had been protests by the NTPC and I think by the Power Ministry also at that point of time, that Indian coal does not have sulfur per se. Only, to the best of my knowledge, only coal which is from Margarita areas in Meghalaya, that has high sulfur. The rest of the Indian coal has very low sulfur content. Now, when you introduced this kind of an additional liability, should have taken a very objective view. By all means, protect the cities from pollution, but please see the kind of coal you are using and the other kinds of pollution. It's not only thermal power plants which are doing it. There are brick kilns all over the countryside which are using coal, and God knows what kind of coal they are using in many cases. Be strict on everybody there. Just don't go for the big fish. Yes, strategy-wise, go for them. But look at this protest. This protest was unheeded for almost a decade. And now in 2025, after some studies have shown that no real impact is there besides an expenditure, this has been relaxed.
Absolutely, sir. So that's about the background for this, that's about the rationale for this. But I also wanted to get your understanding on the broader implications, especially when it comes to a renewed emphasis on the coal power generation in India's energy strategy. How do you think this fits into the India's energy strategy puzzle as well?
I think it's certainly a leg up for more private investment to come in, because NTPC, by and large, you see, they were the only ones who complied with this directive and ensured that this was done. Now, as far as that investment is concerned, it's certainly giving out a cleaner emission. And within the city norms, I think the stipulation which has been put, about 10-kilometer area, that I think is very desirable and a good move. For the rest of the country, I think it eases investment. It will ease the tariff also to a little extent. And particularly now when renewable energy is competing very, very hard and closely with thermal power, this is certainly a significant boost. Though renewable energy also needs storage, if you don't add that, it is giving a very tough call to the coal-based thermal power plants.
Absolutely. So it's a desirable move all in all, Mr. Razdan, but I also wanted to understand, just going off, taking a leaf off of what you said, there's also two sides to the coin, right? On one side, it is making India an attractive sector in terms of the power sector being more attractive at this point in time, but also in terms of the carbon footprint also, it's making the picture a little more murky there, right? Because across the globe, you do have certain carbon footprint requirements that are already set in stone. So how do you think those two sides of the coin can get balanced?
I would say when you're talking globally, then you should look at per capita emissions, which we've been saying all the time. Our share of per capita emissions is still very low as compared to the developed countries. And I think for an equitable solution to the problem, you have to look at per capita emissions and not only gross emissions. By and large, we have been complying with all our obligations, and I think India needs to be credited for it. However, hydro sources being limited, and for solar also, mind you, Land is also a constraint in India. It doesn't have the luxury of huge surplus of land. We are trying pump storage also to the extent we can. We've given it a renewed thrust. It's not that the other areas are not being attended to. Nuclear also, there's great likelihood and a prospect of the SMRs being introduced, and nuclear power as a base load power will hopefully come in a much bigger way than it has been so far. See, renewable power is an intermittent power, and you need a strong baseload support. China has done that with thermal and nuclear power. Well, India will have to go the same way, keeping in view the size of our populations and the expanding phase of the economy. So both thermal and nuclear, and I think nuclear in a much larger proportion than heretofore, with a lot of private sector participation, hopefully, we should ramp up the baseload power. And wherever the renewable power is there, we will also have to yank it up with storage facility, which is concomitant. And the increasing with the IT expansion, the kind of power that you will require in the data banks, in all kinds of activities, transactions, your power demand is going to surge, and also with the EVs being recommended across the country, you need much more electricity. The citizens are going to demand it. So you will have to have a healthy balance of baseload power, where I think private sector will also be expected to come into the nuclear sector with all the due safeguards from the Atomic Energy Regulatory Board, hopefully. So thermal and nuclear combined will be required for baseload power. There is no way out. And I'm glad that MOEF has recognized that Indian coal doesn't have that kind of sulfur characteristics which some of the other coal has. And luckily, I think our imported coal also is reasonably good. It doesn't have that problem.
That just about sums it up when it comes to demand, right, sir? But I also wanted to get a sense of whether or not you had any number in mind when it comes to demand. Is there any number that you had in mind when it comes to the rise in demand that you've talked about?
I think the next 6 months or 1 year is going to be crucial, when we will probably have to, number one, assess the demand which we need for data centers, because you're going electronic in a very big way. The other is how fast EVs are going to pick up. If EVs pick up fast, then you will certainly need much more electricity round the clock. Now, I think simultaneously, urban buildings will have to produce their own solar power. Your building designs will need to be reorganized, and buildings have to be energy self-contained as far as possible. If there is time for a relook, or I would say a revision of the building norms, materials, new materials need to come in. We need to kick that in. Energy efficiency, which has been receiving a good thrust for more than 20 years now, needs to kick in even faster. And the price incentives for energy efficient products, or star label products, which I tried even as power secretary.
Absolutely. So there's in fact a lot of moving pieces to the entire story in terms of the entire puzzle. So there's a lot that we need to keep track of. But thank you so much for taking time out this afternoon, Mr. Razdan, and joining us.